Hi, I'm Mark Greer, Executive Director of the Akron Bicentennial, and in partnership with PBS Western Reserve, we're pleased to present the Forgotten History Forum series. The Forgotten History Forums will explore aspects of Akron's history that, while critical to our development, are not often discussed. Throughout this year-long series, we'll highlight seminal points in our history, some undiscovered, and others which still challenge us today. Topics will include women trailblazers in Akron's history, the development of the new Akron History Anthology published by the University of Akron Press, Akron's Native American history, the history of deaf rubber workers, the impact of urban renewal, particularly on Akron's Black community, and the history of the African American Church, among others. On behalf of the Akron Bicentennial, we hope you enjoy our Forgotten History Forum series.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out this evening, and welcome to the first of 12 Forgotten History Forums. We're so glad that you're here. We're even more glad that it's not as cold as it was last week, and there's no ice on the sidewalks. So thank you all for coming out and being here with us. We're really grateful to Howard Parr for hosting us here at the night stage, and the amazing civic team. We cannot thank you all enough. Yes, definitely. They deserve a round of applause. And the Forgotten History Forum series, we're so grateful to have as our signature sponsor, FirstEnergy Foundation, who is again sponsoring all 12 of these. These will happen every month. We're finalizing the last few dates on the year, and then all of those dates will be released soon, but we'll actually be having our next one. Mark your calendars. It's going to be on our website, of course, but we're going to have our next one Tuesday, February 25th at the Akron Summit County Public Library in the main auditorium. And that one is going to be starting at 6 p.m. This will be the only one of the year that started at 7. So you should feel very exclusive. The rest of them will be starting at 6, and most of those will be, again, at the Akron Public Main Library. The Forgotten History Forum series will explore a number of aspects of Akron's history that were pivotal to our development, but not often discussed. Next month, which we mentioned, will actually focus on trailblazers in Akron history and all women. So we're looking forward to that one. The Women's History Project is going to be a part of that. We'll also look at Native American history. We'll have one of our forums will be about urban renewal. We'll do one on the history of theaters in Akron. Jen Kidd, who is the head of the Nightlight Theater, will be heading up that one. We'll do a history forum on the history of sports and athletic wear in Akron. We'll also do one on the history of the African American Church and its impact here in Akron, as well as the work of Dr. Shirla McLean and her groundbreaking documentary on Akron's African American history, as well as music history. That'll be a part of the Forgotten History Forum series, and of course, much more. We're looking forward as well because we are so proud to have as our exclusive media partner, PBS Western Reserve. We cannot thank PBS Western Reserve enough for their partnership in the Bicentennial, not only for the Forgotten History Forum series, but also for a number of other core initiatives. So look forward to coming to a screen near you soon. And yes, the camera is rolling now, so just be aware. We're really looking forward again to seeing this come forth. And each month, we'll be actually putting the forum itself on our website. That's at akron200.org. Just a few things. When you came and sat down, you should have set on a postcard. If you click on the QR code there, that'll take you to our website, akron200.org. And on that homepage, you can scroll down and sign up for email alerts. You can do that, and monthly we'll send you an email. It'll highlight what's happening that month, some of the big things that are on the horizon. And we're really excited about this first Forgotten History Forum series with the Akron History President, Dave Lieberth, who you may have heard of if you lived here in Akron. But also, we're so happy that this forum is literally on the formation and the development of the Akron History Center. That is just 3 doors down here on South Main Street. We're going to be having the grand opening of the Akron History Center on April 5th. That's Saturday morning at 11 a.m. And I've already been inside, and it's amazing. You're going to want to come and see that. And again, the grand opening will be April 5th, 2025. I want to just say a word about Dave Lieberth. We work rather closely together with the Akron Bicentennial. I first met Dave when I was working at Leadership Akron, and Dave has been such a wealth of resources and knowledge, not only to this community, the entire city of Akron, and really our region. No one has written more and advocated more for the history of Akron, and so we're really honored to have him to be the opener of the Forgotten History Forum series. Just to say a few things more about Dave. Dave is also the executive secretary of the Akron Bicentennial Commission. And can I just also ask, do we have any bicentennial commissioners here? If you would just raise your hand, please. Thank you all. Thank you. Thanks to our bicentennial commissioners and all their support. Dave was also from 2002 to 2012. He was the deputy mayor of the city of Akron. He is chairman emeritus of the Summit County Historical Society and is a founder of the Leadership Akron program and chairs the Community Engagement Committee of Summa Health. Dave is a founding member of the LeBron James Family Foundation Advisory Board, and in 2019, the Akron Community Foundation selected him to receive the annual Bert Polsky Humanitarian Award. And I will just also say Dave is a devoted husband, father, and grandfather, and we are so glad to have him come and share this Forgotten History Forum series on the Akron History Center. So please help me give a warm welcome to Akron History Center President Dave Lieberth.
Thank you. Well, if you were expecting a formal presentation, you're going to be a little disappointed. We did that for the Akron Roundtable back on December 5th, which was the last day of Akron's 199th year. In discussing how this forum should go forward, we decided it should be pretty informal. That's why I'm going to be sitting down instead of standing. I didn't wear a jacket tonight. I hope you're comfortable. Certainly, Mark was right. We're glad we don't have the cold and the ice on the sidewalks. But more importantly, you all found a parking place. See, it's not that hard. You did it. We're glad that you're here. For about probably the last 5 years, I've been doing these presentations for probably 40 years in all, since the 1980s. But for the last 5 years, I've been starting each of my presentations with the sense of place, talking about where we are. This is a building that was first occupied by a Hungarian immigrant whose name, as you might know, was Jacob Whitelaw. He was a respected member of the Jewish community, and you also might know his house. He lived on Highland Square on West Market Street at the house that you all know as the American Legion site of the Wendell Willkie chapter of the American Legion. You knew that, Claire, I know for sure. And so Jacob Whitelaw came to Akron in about 1878. He was in the liquor business. He actually worked a little bit on the Ohio and Erie Canal, and he built a saloon down the street a little bit further. In August of 1900, his saloon was destroyed by a riot that occurred right out here on Main Street, and I'll talk a little bit about that more, but he built this building in 1903. Whitelaw's was a place where rubber workers could rub elbows with the middle management of rubber companies. Some of the bosses all, of course, were gathered at Portage Country Club, but this was their club. It was said that Wendell Willkie was a frequent patron, in fact, of Whitelaw's Cafe. And on January the 20th of January 17th of 1920, that was the night the Volstead Act took effect, and we began a whole period of having no liquor at all, and the lines to White Laws were out the door and around the block that night for one last drink when it all started. On the upper floors, and of course the building has been changed in many ways since then, there was an athletic club and they had boxing matches on the upper floors. And in more recent years, in the 1990s, this place was the bar known as Cheers. I want to talk a little bit more about what happened on this block in August of 1900. Again, this place was important. Akron City Hall was located right here at the corner where the Landmark building is now. And it had a jail cell in it, as was the custom in those days. And the sheriff incarcerated prisoners there. In a day of August of 1900, a black man whose name was Lewis Peck was arrested and charged with the assault of a 9-year-old girl. The next day, the Akron newspapers published their front page in red ink. They trumpeted the arrest of Lewis Peck, and that night a mob gathered outside these very walls, and they were intending on lynching Lewis Peck and administering their own sense of justice. The sheriff of Summit County at the time knew that the mob was gathering, and so he had spirited away Lewis Peck to a jail in Cleveland. And when the mob discovered that they had been denied their target, they erupted in violence. They broke into a hardware store that also had the White Law name on it. And in those days, because we did a lot of coal mining in the area, they had sticks of dynamite in the hardware store. So they stole the sticks of dynamite, they stole kerosene, and they blew Akron City Hall to smithereens, and including the White Law Tavern as well. The end of the story is important because in 1912, the governor of Ohio pardoned Lewis Peck. He had been forced into giving a conviction, and there never was any evidence against him. These 6 buildings, starting here and moving north to the Landmark building, were all scheduled to be demolished in 2002. That's the year that I joined the mayor's office. And I was a little dismayed that this built legacy that we have here, these 6 wonderful buildings that have a unique architectural style, were going to be torn down. The city had already moved out the peanut shop from this location to their new location across the street. They were beginning to vacate the other buildings in the block and the Landmark building itself. The city engaged a developer in 2003. His idea was to tear all these buildings down and to build something new here, perhaps an office for a law firm, an office building for a law firm. I'm happy that Mayor Don Plasquale stopped the demolition of these buildings and saw the opportunities that existed in developing with using state and federal historic tax credits. We had another developer from Cleveland come through, and he had the rights to develop these properties for about 10 years, roughly from about 2007 to about 2017. Never could get off the ground. And so these buildings stayed here as they were, and every winter they got a little bit worse, to the point that when we finally found the right developer, Bob Dehoff of Stark County and Don Taylor of the Welty Building Company, the buildings almost weren't worth saving. They were that far gone. Roofs were gone, holes in the walls. It was really pretty terrible. They put together a plan to redevelop these 6 buildings, and it took in 15 different sources of funding. Now, that's a first for Summit County. Nobody had ever used a capital stack with 15 different sources of funds. But with that, they were able to create the Bowery Project with 92 market rate apartments, develop the lower level for what is now the Crave Restaurant. Their kitchen is actually next door in what we call Building B. There are apartments above the other buildings as well. To put Burgess & Nyepel, the engineering firm, in Building C. I'm in Building D with the Akron History Center. Soon there will be a wine bar in Building E, right next door. And then there was this building. We wanted the Knight Foundation to participate in this project, but they did not want to give money to the developer, but they certainly were willing to give money to the Akron Civic Theater. And Howard Parr had a vision for a new black box theater, and his daughter Francine has been using it to the maximum, I would say, Francine, with her shows that she has been producing here for the Millennium Theater Project and others. And here we are tonight. And so we're in this wonderful building that's been restored, that doesn't look like any town USA. I'm glad that they saved the big liquor advertisement there in the back. And what I would tell you, they also saved a couple of other things. That light fixture right there, you can turn around and look. There are two of them. There's one there, and then if you go back to the stairway up to the mezzanine, there's a second light fixture. We found those. I see Danny Zampella here, captain in the Akron Police Department at the time. Danny, do you remember going through these buildings back in 2003? I thought at that point, we thought they were going to be demolished. And so Captain Zampella at the time, we wanted somebody who carried a sidearm, and that wasn't going to be me. We also took a reporter with us, Jim Carney from the Beacon Journal, and our friend Bruce Ford, the photographer. And the four of us walked through all four of these buildings on this side, and we documented them for historical purposes with Bruce's photographs, but we also retrieved those two milk glass light globes that are in an Art Deco style of the period, about 1921, and we reinstalled them. Howard had his architect reinstall them 100 years later in 2021, and so there they sit today. The bar was right here, and behind the bar, we found a baseball bat. Now, there was no baseball being played here, but as I talked to former patrons, they referred to the baseball bat as a peacekeeper that the bartender might use. And I'm happy to say that we've now displayed that baseball bat in the Akron History Center at 172 South Main Street. Let me talk a little bit about the planning for the bicentennial. When I left the mayor's office in 2012, I knew that we had only 13 years left until the bicentennial would be celebrated. And so I wanted to be sure that we had our own house in order at the Summit County Historical Society. I'm glad to see Chris Esker here tonight, the chairman of the board of the Historical Society. And so we spent a few years putting together funds that would remodel the Perkins Mansion, save the plaster in the upper floors, redo the pillars on the front of the stone mansion. And then we worked to the turn to the John Brown House, which was in terrible shape. The siding had been completely deteriorated due to a very bad decision years ago when it became a show house for the Junior League. They had used a chemical wash on it that destroyed the siding that had been installed in 1832. So over a 6-year period, we raised $1 million and we completely redid the siding. We redid the downspout and the drainage. We made ADA accessible bathrooms possible. And we did all of those things so that the John Brown House could be useful as a place where we could tell the story, not only of that part of Akron, but the story of African American history, which figured prominently in John Brown's life. At that time, too, we knew that we would need to develop some platforms for the bicentennial on which we could mount information, both historical information and celebratory information. And the first of those platforms was the Akron History Center. 40 years ago, a committee of the Summit County Historical Society looked at an idea that had been advanced by Dominic Gazzetta, the president of the University of Akron, to build a rubber museum on the campus. We asked the question, what should the role of the society be, and what should this museum look like? And so in 1983, we published a report documenting the various aspects of Akron's history and industrial history for the most part, and how it should be interpreted. And that report included a big section on innovation and invention. So in 1987, when the National Council of Intellectual Property Law attorneys were coming around looking for a new home for their Inventors Hall of Fame, we were prepared with that report and the connections we had made with the Ohio Historical Society at the time. And that really was foundational to our getting the National Inventors Hall of Fame in Akron. Now, a lot's happened to the Inventors Hall of Fame since then. And if you want to know the entire story, alcohol will need to be involved for me to tell that whole story. But if you want to buy the beer, I'll tell the story. So we knew that we wanted to have a museum that covered the 200-year history of Akron. And if it was ever going to happen after 40 years, it had to happen by July of 2025. And that was our target date and our deadline and our vision, that would have to happen then, or it would never happen at all. So we set out to facilitate that vision. Over the years, when I was deputy mayor, we started Lock 3 in 2003. And we had all that space down on that lower level, so we created kind of an arcade of museums that involved the society, that involved the library and the university archives and Stan Hewood and Hauer House and the Ohio Near East Canalway Coalition and others, the Marble Museum. And so we created that little museum and we operated it off and on Saturdays and during the winter, during ice skating from 2003 until 2012. And then we were asked if we would allow the Akron Children's Museum to have an exhibit there over Christmas in 2013. They did, they succeeded, they've taken it over, and they've done a magnificent job with the space. And now, of course, we have an Akron Children's Museum in downtown Akron. So we knew that the History Center was going to be the leading edge of the bicentennial. A second project was that we wanted to do a book, because we had done a book for the centennial in 1925. We had done a book in the 125th anniversary, Carl Grismer's History of Akron and Summit County, the most comprehensive book, history of Akron ever done. We knew that they had done a history by Dr. George Knepper, one of my mentors and Akron's greatest historian, I would say, in 1975 for the sesquicentennial. So what kind of book would we do this year? And we chose to do an anthology. We solicited authors 2 years ago, and we came up with 28 authors, each of whom was going to write on a topic that hadn't been written or published before about Akron history. And so we have a new book coming out called Akron at 200, 28 chapters, 28 authors. Hopefully it'll be published and in your hands by our July celebration this year. It's being published by the University of Akron Press. The third platform that I was interested in before we got into the planning for the bicentennial was Akron Public Schools. I called my friend Adam Motter, who's head of curriculum for social studies at Akron Public Schools, and I asked him, what are teachers doing to teach Akron history in grades 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 and 10 and 11? And he said, whatever they can. I said, what do you have as materials? He said, well, we take whatever we can get off the internet and sort of do it in an offhand kind of way. That didn't seem the right approach for our bicentennial. So at the time, I went to the person who was the superintendent then, and she convened a group of educators within the school system, teachers who have now been paid extra for their time to develop a curriculum for the study of Akron history. It'll be all digital materials that'll be available online to teachers that they can download and use in their classrooms in the most effective way possible to teach age-appropriate history in grades 3 and 4, 7 and 8, and 10 and 11, and that is underway. In 2022, I approached Mayor Dan Horrigan about next steps in our centennial and in our sesquicentennial. We had a commission of citizens oversee the project, and so Mayor Horrigan appointed 30 people to the Akron Bicentennial Commission, and that group has been meeting on a quarterly basis since 2022. And in a year ago, in November, really, of 2023, it was decided with Mayor Malik's encouragement that we have a separate corporation named and founded to actually administer the details of the bicentennial. We employed Mark Greer, who was a member of the commission. Mark is our executive director, and Mark now has done an incredible job of marshaling together all of the assets of our volunteer boards, of the ideas that he's been able to pursue, ideas that have come in over the transom. And so we soon will have something that you'll be able to hold in your hands. And Mark, you didn't mention it, but we have a magazine that's about 120 pages long, beautifully done, beautifully written. I didn't do it, so it's really good. And it'll be coming out sometime here in the first quarter of 2025. So you'll look for it. It'll be mailed to every household in the city, and then copies will be available at the Akron History Center. So what we wanted to do in 2022 was create, and this is a simple mission statement, an enduring free exhibit of Akron's 200-year history. Now, in Akron, we have about 15 organizations, by my count, that operate some sort of history museum or exhibit in one way or another. But there's no one place where the entire history of the community is told. That is something that Cleveland has, Columbus has, Cincinnati has, Dayton has, Toledo has, but we didn't have. And so here was an opportunity for us to develop that one place where all the history of Akron could be told. We knew right off that we needed partners, and so our partners included the Summit County Historical Society. Leanne Neff-Hepner, its CEO, could not be here tonight. We also knew that we wanted to partner with the Special Collections Division of the Akron Summit County Public Library, and we're happy to have with us tonight the department manager, Mary Plazo, and the museum specialist, Caitlin Conley, who will be our permanent site manager for the Akron History Center when it opens. The library was the most likely partner for us because of their own experience with preserving and curating Akron's history already, that they do a wonderful job of. And as a tax-supported public institution, they're in the perfect position to provide longevity. I'm 77, so I was looking for somebody who had longevity, and there we have it in the library. And so hopefully this will go on into perpetuity and long after that I am able to climb those steps in the Akron History Center. The path we started on then was, once we had the partners, we needed feasibility. I mean, this building, as you'll see when you eventually go through it, and I'm hoping we can have some tours even as soon as next month, possibly, is 3,000 square feet. It's 3 floors. It has a unique characteristic in the Bowery project because it's the only building that isn't permitted to have any retail use. And the reason for that is the city of Akron holds an easement on the property, and they didn't want any retail use in that property. So Don Taylor of the Weldy Building Company brought me in one day, and he said, "Hey, do you think of anything we could put on these walls?" And I thought back 40 years, and I said, "I have an idea." And here it is. It's been 40 years in the making. And we started there, but we needed to have people who actually knew what they were doing, who had built museums before, help us understand whether or not this was possible. Well, we didn't have far to look. I really liked the National Museum of Psychology at the University of Akron. Dr. David Baker had put that project together at the Cummings Center. And when I talked to him, he said, "You need to talk to Dennis and Kathy Berry." Dennis was the first executive director of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Kathy worked for the Cleveland Art Museum. They became married, a couple, and as a couple, they planned and developed the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., the Maltz Museum of Jewish Heritage, the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, the Museum of the Olympics and Paralympics in Colorado Springs. So, enough said about their credentials. They were absolutely perfect for us to talk to and to see whether or not this would work. Brought them down here only on one condition. They insisted on having lunch at the Diamond Grill. And so that was a cheap date, let me tell you. They walked through the building, they saw the possibilities, they went back to their home in Cleveland Heights. We then met with them and gave them a narrative that I had prepared about the history of Akron and topics that we would want to cover. And they came up with the fundamental concepts of how this place would work and how it would look. We then needed a fabricator, somebody who was expert at making historical exhibits. I mean, a lot of people in town can do exhibits on foam core and they look pretty good, but we really wanted something special. A plus, world class kind of exhibits. And so we employed CEI. The company is in Canal Fulton. They do museums and industrial trade shows. They have about 100 employees, and they are really wonderful. And so they became our fabricator of exhibits and assisted greatly with the design of how all of these things would fit together in this 3,000 square foot space. They started, using their words, they started making sawdust in November of 2023. And then the exhibits were constructed in Canal Fulton and ready to install this past August. And so that process started in August. And actually, we sort of completed most of it last week with Caitlin and with Leanne and myself and Mary and Vic Fleischer from the University of Akron Archives and Wayne Buchanan from the Lighter Than Air Society. We were able to finally sort of put everything together. And I would say we're about 96% done right now. We have a few more exhibit cases to fill, which will happen over the next several weeks, we hope. The building has entrances on Main Street and on Lock 4, both. And that was the idea that the city had, was to have a building that you could enter from Main and go to Lock 4 and vice versa, especially during the summertime when Lock 3 performances are in place. So let me tell you about the Akron History Center by the numbers. There are 62 exhibits. Right now, there are 113 artifacts displayed. There are 30 video flat screens. There are 22 separate video presentations, PowerPoints, and several narrated with audio. Plus, there are 64 video biographies of Akronites who impacted America. It's one of our exhibits on the Main Street level. We've selected 64 people who, in Akron's history, who have gone on to have an impact on the country in sports, in show business, in science, in the professions, in literature, in poetry, in acting, in the arts, and so forth. And then by the numbers, we have 84 individuals, corporations, foundations, and government sponsors who have given us money in order to carry out this project. As of today, we've raised $2,200,000. And frankly, we've spent most of it at this point. So that's when you see a world-class set of exhibits next door, that's why. We've bought and paid for the best that we could find. So the building that we're going into was built in 1909. It was started as the Imperial Grocery Store, and it then became occupied by Wagner Provisions for most of the 20th century. Interestingly, many of you here, of course, know about DeVity's Grocery Store in North Hill. They posted a Facebook entry here yesterday or the day before about their own history and being proud of Leonard DeVity's, who was their founder. And I discovered that Leonard DeVity's had a produce booth in this building, which is now the Akron History Center. So we have a direct connection with the DeVity's family and the Garlando family, who also had a produce booth here and became very famous in Akron grocery community. We have identified that history of the building as part of one of our exhibits, and you'll see that our very first exhibit in the building is the terrazzo floor that you will step on when you enter from Main Street that dates back to 1909. And so the State Historic Preservation Commission, which was in one of those 15 funding sources, said, you got to keep the floor, and we were delighted to do so as a homage to all that came before. The building in the 1950s was Sif's shoe store, you may remember, and in the 1990s it was J Drugs. There is an apartment up above the Akron History Center as part of the Bowery project. And so we are managed by the Welty Building Management Company that has entered into a license agreement with the Akron History Center, the library, and the city of Akron. Let me pause for a moment and take a breath and take a drink of water and just ask if anybody has any questions about where we are so far and how we got here, or whether or not you have a comment that you'd like to make about anything I've said. Okay, yeah, Elaine. The occupancy quickly grew to 100% after it opened in 2022. Mark Greer, I think, is a tenant there, right? Yeah, okay. I didn't divulge your medical information, so don't get upset with me. But I would say that it's everybody from the people who are managing the property. They say they have older adults. Many of them are single retirees who wanted to live downtown, close to the arts, close to the library, close to the university, close to their medical care. We certainly have a lot of young people who are maybe having their first job at Gojo or at FirstEnergy or with the city or the county and will want to be close to their work. And then a series of couples and professionals along the way for whom this is the urban life that they want. For me, looking at the change that it's brought to downtown, and I was involved with downtown for all 10 years that I was with the city and oversaw a lot of the details of planning it. I told Susie Graham, who was at that time CEO of the Downtown Akron Partnership, there's something new in downtown Akron. She said, what's that? I said, dogs. We never had dogs before. And now, I mean, I usually arrive down here well before 6 a.m. most mornings. There's people walking their dogs. Sometimes I'm here at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, people walking their dogs. So we have dogs downtown. And so it is part of the urban landscape now. And the Welty Corporation has just acquired the rights to develop the old YWCA building up the hill. And so that building and this building will kind of be partners in their tenancy. Down the street, we have the new Goodrich apartments, which are luxury apartments. There's about 100 of them. Across the street, 159 South Main, we have about 50 more apartments. Joel Testa has said now that he is prepared to develop the former hotel on Cascade Plaza. That'll be about 60, 70 new apartments as well. So at some point here in the few years ahead of us, we should have about 300 or 400 living units in downtown Akron, all market rate apartments. Plus the fact, of course, we have university housing too, as well at the other end of the street. Anything else? If not, what I'm going to do is, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, please. Hi, Harriet. Well, the second question first. You're looking at the person who chose the exhibits, pretty much. But I mean, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, there's a lot of Akron history, and the choice didn't center around what to put in the Akron History Center. What were we going to leave out? The third question you asked is, will there be changing exhibits? Probably not for this year. I think we're pretty well fixed that when we open the Akron History Center for the bicentennial, it's probably going to be pretty much the same exhibit that you'll see 11 months from now. going forward in the future, we certainly have encouraged our partners to think about how we can stage temporary exhibits and seasonal exhibits and seasonally appropriate exhibits for Black History Month, Women's History Month, during Founders Day weekend in June, during the Soapbox Derby in July, during the golf tournament in August. All of these events and things that are important to Akron have artifacts that are associated with them, and that we can display them on a temporary basis. So I foresee that that would be one thing. In terms of permanent funding, I met with the chairman of our board this morning, Bill Considine, the former CEO of Children's Hospital, and he and I began talking about establishing an endowment that would develop a permanent source of funding for the History Center, and so that it can sustain itself without challenging the funding that the library already receives. The library has been a generous partner in that they've employed a full-time person, a museum specialist, to help us coordinate all the affairs of running the center once it opens. That is their primary contribution. But there will be other opportunities for the library to participate on a long-term basis as well. And with an endowment, I believe that we can sustain it. And one of the things that I've noticed is people are, hey, look at you all. You're all excited about this. You all wanted to come out here tonight, for heaven's sakes. So there's tremendous interest in the community. As I said, we have 84 separate entities, individuals, businesses, foundations, and corporate and government units who have already contributed. And so there will be an ongoing campaign to fund an endowment and to fund our operating costs. Thank you, Harriet. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Are you talking from upstairs? Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry. I heard the voice and I couldn't see the disembodied voice. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, it makes you awfully thirsty, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, Akron is the largest small town in America. You know that. And so it doesn't surprise me that you had that encounter. And certainly any place there's multiple stories about people traveling all over the world and running into their neighbor, in Florida or in the Utah or other places that they're vacationing. Thank you for the comment. Let me go ahead and tell you what's in the museum so that I can give you a fast tour of what you're going to see. Immediately upon entering the Lock 4 entrance, you're going to see 2 sandstone pillars. Those have a historic basis. I recovered them from the demolition of the Heisman Lodge at the Rubber Bowl about a year and a half ago. When they were tearing it down, I asked if we could have 2 sandstone pillars. And so that's the first thing that you'll see as you enter the museum. But there's also another reason for that, and that is that our first exhibit is about the foundation that Akron was built on, the Sharon sandstone that was used to build the locks, that was used to build the courthouse, that was used to build the Old Stone School. All of those stones had a real historic meaning to the city of Akron. We also then have paneled exhibits. You'll see a series of wood panels on which the exhibits are mounted, and you'll see a wooden frame of the exhibit on the Ohio and Erie Canal. Here's what's cool about that. In 2013, when I became chairman of the Historical Society again, we had a terrible storm on the city, and it blew down some wonderful old trees that we had, century-old trees. And they were all over our lawn, and we had another one cut down to prevent it from falling down. And so a friend of mine in the Bureau of Engineering at the city has a hobby, as he owns a sawmill on the side with his brother. So I called him. He came and he picked up our trees, our oak and maple and poplar and walnut trees, and he took them away. A year later, he returned with a pile of aged and milled lumber. And so we had all this lumber stored at the Historical Society for about the last decade, pretty much. And today it's all gone. It's all in the Akron History Center. So when you walk in that lower level, you're going to be seeing wood that was growing on the home at the home of Akron's founding family 100 years ago. When I was a kid, going to the Akron Zoo, I was always excited about the little natural history museum they had there, because they had bones and they had, skeletons and animals and things. And I thought, is there something we can do to connect kids with their natural history? And in 1966, when I was working at the University of Akron as a college junior, I ran into Dr. Paul Wingard in the geography department, and he was up to his knees in muck at the excavation site of the Billows Funeral Home in Fairlawn. And in that hole, they found the skeleton of a juvenile mastodon. And so those bones have been at the university ever since. So when you walk into the Akron History Center, you're going to see the vertebrae of a juvenile mastodon that actually once trod the grounds here in Summit County. We could exhibit the original piece, and so in a number of cases, what we've had, thank God for modern technology, we have had a 3D printer using polyurethane materials to reproduce with great precision some artifacts that we didn't want to display, but we didn't want people to hurt. They can touch them, and that is the juvenile mastodon vertebrae. Also, we have a blade that was found on the estate we now call Stan Hewitt along the Portage Path about 100 years ago. We acquired it in an auction about 20 years ago, and that blade is touchable by the kids so that they can touch exactly what something that relates to our history of indigenous people in this area. We have exhibits on the natural history about indigenous people, and of course the things that made Akron what it is today, the Northwest Ordinance, the mapping of the Western Reserve, the development of Middlebury as a town, the development of two Akrons, North Akron and South Akron, the Gore, and we're right across the street from the Gore, because North Akron and South Akron were divided right here by this street. And they were divided right up at the top of the hill at High Street, where there were 4 churches, one on each corner, and they dare not face north or south, so their doorways always faced east or west. And what's that street called right out here? Church Street, for a reason. That's also part of our history as well. We have a wall devoted to John Brown, who I call the single most consequential individual ever to live in Akron or Summit County. He was a terrorist. The very definition of a terrorist is someone who uses violence to promote political ends, and he did. And his raid on Harper's Ferry was fruitless, but he thought that it would inspire an uprising by the 1,000 or so enslaved people who lived in the area of Harper's Ferry in 1859. He knew that enslaved men could not use firearms to join the uprising, so he had 100 pikes made by foundry in Massachusetts and shipped to the house he was using as headquarters in Maryland. And so we've had one of those pikes reproduced also, so that it's part of our exhibit to just have a contact, a touch point, where this is why he did that. He expected it to make a difference. And it did, because 18 months after John Brown's raid, the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. The Smithsonian, no less an authority, defines the period of the Civil War as ending with Abraham Lincoln's assassination and beginning with John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. And John Brown, more importantly, John Brown had allies in Akron. We have a poster that we discovered in the university archives just a couple of years ago about a meeting being held in Akron against slavery, for example. We're posting a photograph, the only picture taken of John Brown in Akron while he was here at the Battles Studio in downtown Akron. And so you'll see that as well. Akron played such an important part in the history of 19th century America that we have a whole display case then on that level about Akron's role in the American Civil War. George Todd Perkins, grandson of Akron's founder, was a colonel in the Union Army. He fought in the Battle of Chickamauga. He brought back with him something called a rally stump, a piece of tree that contains both Confederate and Union bullets in it. And so we have that displayed. It's one of the artifacts we have. And other artifacts that tell the story of Akron's role in the Civil War. Another one of Simon Perkins' grandsons, whose name was Simon as well, was a quartermaster in the Union Army. And so we have his chests. And so we have 3 chests stacked there that would have contained files of personnel and purchases, things like that. And it helps us tell another story. What did they wrap the files in during the Civil War in those chests? What did they wrap them in to keep them separate? Red tape. Thank you. Yep, that's where it came from. And so there's so many multiple stories on any one artifact that helps people connect. When you walk into that lower level, you're going to be standing on a floor that is completely covered with a hand-drawn map done by Charles Perkins in 1899 of the Ohio and Erie Canal through downtown Akron. And you'll see from that map the street layout in downtown Akron in 1899 as well. We also have his drawing on the wall he was the canal engineer, of the 21 locks that we refer to today as the staircase of locks, which is really why Akron developed. Both Simon Perkins and Paul Williams knew that if the canal would cross the watershed divide on their land, there would have to be this steep location of locks that would force the development of the city. Each lock took about 100,000 gallons of water. It took about 45 minutes to lock through one lock. So you could see that it was a day-long process, and a town would grow up around that staircase of locks, and it did. That's why we're here today. We also can point to the fact that the hydraulics needed to operate those locks was significant, about 100,000 gallons of water per lock. That came from today what we call the Portage Lakes, the series of glacial kettles that were excavated and dug and mined for their water supply that came down through Summit Lake and eventually into the canal. I'm really pleased that we're able to exhibit one other thing that hasn't been exhibited for a while, and I'm going to pause for a moment. The Historical Society has been in the business of acquiring important artifacts since it was founded 100 years ago. 1924, it was founded in order to plan for Akron's centennial in 1925. We celebrated the Historical Society's centennial last year. But when I became chairman, I immediately went back through all the newsletters of the society, going back to about the 1940s, and I discovered these wonderful messages about having acquired this artifact or that artifact. They used the term relics at the time, relics of Akron history. And one relic that they obtained were the original flintlock pistols owned by General Simon Perkins. The provenance on those pistols was very well established, very well documented, and they have never been really fully displayed. They were shown somewhat during the sesquicentennial, but they've pretty much been in a vault since then. Well, we built a glass case for them, an impenetrable glass case, so that they can now, for the first time ever in most of our lives, be displayed so that we can actually have that contact with the founder of Akron and the pistols that he used ceremonially, I should say, since he saw some action, but probably not with those pistols. And that helps us understand the importance of the Perkins family. There's a video that will describe their important role and a genealogy as well of the family and their contributions to the community. So then you walk up the steps. You can take an elevator too, but take the steps because there's 40 steps in the building between the 3 floors, and 20 of those steps have been labeled. We call them the 20 steps to social justice. Now, these are topics that are harder to exhibit, not to tell in a narrative form, but to exhibit. So what we've done is that we've labeled 20 of those steps that starts with the Northwest Ordinance in 1787 that protected civil liberties and outlawed slavery, John Brown, Sojourner Truth, President Lincoln's call to arms are all mentioned as on those steps, the founding of Wesley Temple, the attempted lynching in downtown Akron in 1900, the chartering of the NAACP in 1917. Both good and bad, the dominance of the Ku Klux Klan in 1926, where it pretty much controlled local government. The mayor was a member of the Klan. Several judges were. Most of the Akron School Board was. And a lot of people just saw them as another political party. And so they did not take into account the hatred that they spewed. And it wasn't so much for Black residents because we only had a couple thousand Black residents in the 1920s. But what they were mostly against, the Klan, were the papists and the Jews. And by the papists, of course, I mean the Italians and the Irish, who they hated, along with the Jews and also the Blacks. And so the Ku Klux Klan dominated the area until, as Claire Dickinson writes in his chapter of the new anthology, Wendell Willkie provided great assistance in demolishing the Ku Klux Klan's power in Akron, along with C.L. Knight, who was the publisher of the Akron Beacon Journal and hated the Klan himself. In 1946, Akron was the intersection of the deaf. We had the largest, in their words, deaf colony in the United States. So that's one of the steps as well as we worked our way towards social justice, recognizing the rights of people with disabilities. Certainly, we also talk about the development of the Fair Housing Contact Service in the 60s and the founding of America's really first sustainable victim assistance program in the country by the Reverend Bob Denton. It goes all the way up to 2011 when LeBron founds his I Promise program, and 2014 when Akron played host to the International Gay Games. All of those events are listed on the steps, and our hope is that we will be then able to provide QR codes and access to the full stories behind them on the website that we will be developing as well. When you go up those steps to the mid-level, the level we call Boomtown, that's where we talk about Akron's industrial history in the late 19th and early 20th century. We have one cabinet called Akron Originals, probably our most populated cabinet, I would say, and it has the artifacts of Akron manufacturing that are not rubber. So that's where we display the story of the cereal industry that was founded here by Ferdinand Schumacher, the clay products industry, as well as that included marbles and included vitrified sewer pipe. Those are all on display. Fishing tackle from Arbogast and from Pfluger. and Sawfield books, just to name a few. I think we also have some dum-dums in that case as well, because the Dum-Dum Sucker was named and founded in Akron by the Akron Candy Company on Sumner Street as well in the 1930s. We have a tire display of very unusual and significant tires, including a tire that was mounted on one of Art Arfonz's cars that he used on the Bonneville Salt Flats to set the world land speed record. We have one whole exhibit on the role of alcohol. So Akron, like all cities on the frontier, was founded with a lot of whiskey being consumed. I ask tour groups all the time if they can name the first manufactured product in Akron, and nobody ever gets it because it's so obscure. But whiskey is a manufactured product. And so when Captain Joseph Hart settled Middlebury in 1807, one of the first things he did was create a grist mill. He had grain, barley and oats and wheat and corn, and grain spoils unless you distill it, and then it lasts a long time. We had the clay to make the jugs to store the whiskey in and to transport it on the Ohio and Erie Canal and the Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal. So we tell that story of not just whiskey, but also our relationship to beer through the German immigrant population as well. Then we talk about the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous at the Gate Lodge of Stan Hewitt in Mother's Day of 1935, when Bill Wilson was looking for a meeting of the Oxford group and was directed to Henrietta Seiberling, and she introduced him to Dr. Bob Smith. Dr. Bob had his office across the street in the Second National Building. He went there for the first time when he left City Hospital as an intern in 1915. And he stayed in the Second National Building, not in the same office, but in different offices, until he died in 1950. One of our benefactors collected the door from Dr. Bob's office at some point in time and stored it in his garage. And so we have the door to Dr. Bob's office that is one of the artifacts that will connect all of those AA adherents from around the world when they come here for Founders Day in June to the co-founder of AA, Dr. Bob Smith. We talk about the labor movement, the founding of the United Rubber Workers Union. We talk about immigration, both by Europeans, by Blacks, by Appalachians, and videos on each of those topics. And you can take a piece of paper that we'll provide, and you can emboss the actual logo of the United Rubber Workers Union on it, since it's sitting there waiting for you to do that with. We have a display on Firestone that includes a chair that was located in Harbell Manor, and then a wonderful lighter-than-air exhibit that is framed by girders that were made for the USS Akron in 1930, not used, but made and then stored. The Lighter-than-Air Society's collection is represented there, also with a model of the Goodyear air dock that works. Press a button, the orange peel doors will open, a blimp will pop out, we'll go back in, the orange peel doors will close. And you might remember the photographs of Mrs. Herbert Hoover, Lou Hoover, who had a rope that she pulled and that exposed a panel in the USS Akron that then a flock of homing pigeons flew out at the dedication ceremony. We have the rope. The rope is there, and the flag from the USS Akron is there as well. So I think artifacts are important. It's important to have this kind of material possessions that were important to people at the time for us to help relate history to. On the main level, then, we have a series of exhibits that are more up-to-date and modern. Goodyear has provided us with a wonderful exhibit. I always wanted to have a NASCAR tire made in Akron, Ohio on display. We do have one there. And you can hear the sound of the racetrack by pressing a pedal underneath the tire. And then Goodyear has, with our vendors, have created a game for our visitors so that you can select from multiple variables and you can race cars on a NASCAR track as well. Also on that level, talking about Akron innovations. Do we have any guitar players here besides Mary Plaza? Anybody else play guitar? Then you might not have heard of Earthquaker Devices. Okay, Earthquaker Devices, founded in a garage in Akron, now occupies 3 buildings in downtown Akron. None of them have signs on them, incidentally. You'll never find them if you don't know where they are, but they're there, 3 buildings. And this is where they manufacture guitar pedals for the world. They ship them literally over all the 7 continents to guitar players who use them to manipulate the audio coming out and in and out of their guitar. And so we have a screen that is connected to a website in Tokyo that has been created for Earthquaker devices. And you can use your fingers on a touch screen and manipulate the effects of all their guitar pedals. It's sort of cool. Kids, especially, I'm sure, will love it. You all know what Akron is famous for. Yes, we're famous for racing tires around the world, both Goodyear and Firestone and Bridgestone as well. You know that we're famous. Who's the most famous person in the world right now from Akron, Ohio? Yeah, well, we know that, number 23. But what you may not know is there's somebody even more important than LeBron James. And I say that as someone who sits on his foundation board. And that is the fact that 1 billion times a day, somebody somewhere in the world pumps Purell into their hand. That was invented in Akron and still made here. And it stems, of course, from the Gojo company. And we're so fortunate that Joe Canfer loaned us his personal artifact of a dispenser device that was hand tooled and machined by his uncle Jerry Littman when he founded Gojo. And it even has a crank on the side to release the soap, the Gojo soap. And of course, Jerry used to scour automobile junkyards for hand cranks, from window cranks from cars. And so we have that piece there right next to a modern day dispenser of Purell that is filled with electronics that actually the dispenser now communicates with your smartphone to tell you how much liquid it has in it, when it was last changed, and how fast it's being used up. I can't stop without talking about the Rhythms of the Rubber City. It's one of our prize exhibits, and Caitlin Conley has curated that exhibit for us. We acquired the collection of the Akron Sound Museum when we started doing this project. The library was the recipient of it, and they are the custodian of those artifacts. And on display now are probably, I don't know, about 40, I would say, items that came from the Akron Sound Collection. And what Caitlin has done is created a wall that starts in 1880, a timeline that goes all the way up to the Black Keys. From Tuesday Musical to the Black Keys, Akron's history, with Howard Street in between, with jazz greats that played in Akron, with the folk and blues era as well, with James Ingram and Ruby and the Romantics and others, with Chrissie Hynde. Of course, with Devo, we are fortunate to have one of the Devo suits and power domes that are on display. So I think I've talked enough. Let me pause for questions now from you about what we have or what you think we're missing. Oh, certainly, you're welcome. To be determined. People always ask the question, pardon me? Yes, thank you. What will be our hours? We can't open until we receive permission from the county building official. And even though we're 96% done with our exhibits, the county building official hasn't given us his blessing yet. When that happens, we will be meeting the Akron History Center, the library, the Summit County Historical Society as partners operating in the project, with the library as the primary operator. We will sit down and we will decide that. It sort of depends, and frankly, we've been so busy doing other things, we just haven't gotten that far yet. But we will, and then we'll post it on our website. You're all welcome to go there to find updated information, Akron History Center, one word, .org. Yeah. Well, we are looking for volunteers. The volunteers will be trained by Caitlin and by the Special Collections Division of the library. We have about 20 people who have expressed an interest in volunteering their services right now. When we open, we will have volunteers on each of the 3 floors. So we're going to need a cadre of volunteers who are interested in Akron history and who are able to talk. Now, we hadn't planned to use the volunteers as narrators so much as just being able to answer questions and to be able to point people in the direction of the exhibits, which pretty much speak for themselves primarily. But go on our website. There's a form there you can fill out, and you can then connect with Caitlin and be on the list to be contacted when we do volunteer training. Thank you. Back in the back. Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. The primary discussion of that is in the exhibit that I didn't mention on Sojourner Truth, who was, of course, interested in women's suffrage first and liberation from enslavement as well. We have a maquette of the statue that was created by Woodrow Nash, and it has its own display case. There's also a video there that talks about it. But you bring up an interesting point. Should we have an exhibit about Black history? Should we have an exhibit about women's history? Should we have an exhibit about gay rights, about the history of people with disabilities? And the answer is that wherever possible, we've tried to integrate into the exhibits all of those elements where they are appropriate. So women's history appears in a variety of ways throughout. We don't have a separate exhibit like they have in the Cleveland History Center right now about that particular issue, women's suffrage. Cleveland History Center did that exhibit in 2020 when they were doing the centennial of the adoption of the, what is it, the 17th Amendment? I can't remember, 17th or 19th Amendment. I forget, but you know what I'm talking about. So that's been our approach. It does not limit us, though, in doing specialized temporary exhibits about topics such as women's suffrage, about Black churches, about all of those other things that we've talked about here tonight. Anything else? Yes, sir. Or ma'am, I'm sorry. Well, both of these entrances will be open. Right now, we believe that the likely venue for our opening ceremony is Lock 4. It's just because we can enter from down there. It's chronologically appropriate. And also, it's a wonderful space. People love being in Lock 4 with the rushing waters of the canal. And there's a stage that'll be erected there for concerts in the summer. So on April 5th, that is being planned right now. But that's, I think, one of the things you can look forward to. We don't have one planned right now. That's also asked a lot. We're going to, you know what? Let us get this damn museum open first, would you please? And then it is, here's what I would tell you. This is a work in progress. And if we come back a year from now, I would still tell you it's a work in progress. And if I see you, Caitlin, 5 years from now, I hope I can get her to admit it's still a work in progress. Okay. And that's the best way for us to approach these wonderful aspects of Akron history. Akron is such a special place. As I said in my roundtable speech, for 100 years, we have punched above our weight as a community of whether it was 300,000 people in the 50s or about 200,000 people now. We have a disproportionate impact on the world around us, whether it's in scientific innovation, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in culture, whether it's in literature. If you watched Henry Louis Gates the other night, just this week, his guest was Rita Dove, who is one of our featured biographies in the wall. We have been an amazing concentration of talent over the years that we want to exploit in this museum by encouraging young people to think beyond themselves. You know, John Meacham, the historian, and many of you have read his book, Soul of America, I suspect, he talks about the fact of what the value of history is. And he mentions the fact, and this week is appropriate, very appropriate to discuss this, I think. No politics here. But he says that the the crises of our own times, when we feel overwhelmed by world events and things that are out of our control, we should be able to look back and understand that people who came before us with measured attendance to these problems found solutions to the problems. That's the value of history. It's to provide perspective. And so, as desperate as people sometimes think things are today, we've always been there. A riot on our main street in 1900, being overtaken by a mob of 3,000 men and women walking down Main Street. We have pictures of it in white hoods and white gowns for the Ku Klux Klan. We've been here before. We had protests during the Vietnam War. We had what some would call a riot in 1968 on Worcester Avenue. Although the men who were on the street in that riot said that it didn't become a riot until the National Guard showed up. In one of our programs that we did here to commemorate the 50th year anniversary of that, we've had problems and we've overcome them. You know, what city in America lost 30,000 well-paying jobs over a decade and bounced back, no pun intended, to a polymer industry that today just recognized this past summer collecting $100 million to develop new technology around polymers here in Akron, okay? So that's what the Akron History Center, in a very serious way, I hope, will accomplish. Yes, Laurie. Laurie asks, what about Akron is it that allows us to punch above our weight? It is our strongest asset. And I would tell you, it is our size. We are well proportioned and well sized for success. David Giffords put it another way. He said, Akron has everything. We only have one of everything, but we have everything. And so here we sit 30 miles from Major League baseball, basketball, and football. Here we sit an hour away, half hour away from cultural attractions that can't be duplicated anywhere in the world. The symphony orchestras that we have, the art museums that we have. But Akron remains the largest small town in America. That is our strength. And I've studied this for 40 years. I mean, it just wasn't in the legal profession that I participated in, where we used to have a phrase that we called a Cleveland lawyer. A Cleveland lawyer was somebody you couldn't trust. You had to put everything in writing because they had no reason not to go back on their word. Akron lawyers did not do that. But when I approached Dr. Bruce Rothman in the medical profession, and a friend of mine who was a CPA with offices in Akron and Cleveland, religious people from the Catholic Church, they all said the same thing. Akron is a different place where people have a natural inclination to collaborate and to agree and to say yes before they say no. That's not true, hasn't been true at the time in Cleveland. Cleveland's getting better, I think, but for many years it didn't. I, I was interviewed by Scene Magazine once and asked a similar question. And I said, and make sure you get this on film, okay? I said, he said, what is it about Akron? I said, well, you know, in Cleveland, if somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're really angry, you may feel free to tell them to read between the lines, you know? In Akron, you don't gesture that way because the person you're gesturing to very much may be your pastor, your kid's teacher, the physician you're going to see next week, your neighbor. And so it's that small town quality that we've been able to preserve. So, Laurie, our size is our biggest advantage, the sense of collaboration. when we employed a consultant in the mayor's office back in about 20 years ago. He said Akron is unique among American Midwest industrial cities in that you can go from your thought process of an invention you'd like to see right up to getting the prototype off the line right here without ever leaving town. We're almost running out of time. We promised that we would be done by 8:30 and so on. One last question, if there is one. If not, I'm going to turn it back to Mark Greer. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you again, Dave, for that. Just wealth of information. We're really looking forward to the opening of the Akron History Center. And again, April 5th. Please save the date. Saturday morning at 11. It's going to be a really a packed day, which will also include, by the way, the Akron Sakura Festival. And in the evening, just after sunset, we're going to have our Light the Locks Festival down here on the canal. A couple of final housekeeping things. I actually was going to mention the Bicentennial magazine, which is coming out, coming to a mailbox near you. We decided to have it mailed to every residence and business here in Akron. Of course, that was before we knew how much more expensive that would make it, but it's going to happen. So mid February, look for it in your mailboxes. Also, a few things. Someone actually asked the question how they could support the Akron History Center. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because we actually have some information that is available on the back table. Actually, Rose Vance Grom. Rose, if you could just wave. Rose has information that if you would like to become a supporter of the Akron History Center, you can see Rose. She'll get you that, and you can be recognized. I know there's a great wall over there where sponsors and donors will be recognized. If you'd like to become a sponsor of the Akron Bicentennial, you can also go on our website. And of course, you have those great cards with the QR code. We actually have some sponsors here in the house with us. If you're a Bicentennial sponsor, would you just raise your hand? See, we've got one, so that means more of you need to join those ranks. Okay. But thank you to all of our Bicentennial sponsors as well. I also wanted to mention, if you haven't already, right outside these doors, you see some of our official Bicentennial merchandise. Frank Miller of Our Cloth Clothing actually fabricated our T-shirts and our hats. The design was done by Monochrome Canvas, and also we also have tote bags and tumblers. So lots of things are available. You can also go on our website and purchase those online. Again, akron200.org. If you're here tonight and you're taking photos, I actually failed to mention this earlier, which I should have. Since PBS Western Reserve is our exclusive media partner, hopefully no one was secretly recording this with a camcorder. But if you're taking photos and you'd like to be sharing those on social media, please use our hashtag, which is KeepIt200. It's also Akron200. You can thank Joe Tucker of South Street Ministries for the KeepIt200 hashtag. Beyond that, I did want to also ask, I wanted to recognize, last but certainly not least, our small but mighty staff at Akron 200. Jacina Chapman, who was our operations manager here. Really thankful for her. And Rose Vance Grom in the back there, who is our historic research and program coordinator. Really happy with these two. I think it's Rose's third week, and I don't think we've scared her off yet. And it's Jacina's going into her third month, and I think I've almost scared her off, but thankfully they're still here. We're really grateful to have all of you here with us. We're looking forward to this entire series again next month, February 25th. Trailblazers, women trailblazers in Akron history, which will be at the Akron Summit County Public Library main auditorium. That's going to be happening again at 6 p.m., not 7 p.m., but at 6. If nothing else, again, thank you for coming out. Thank you again to our signature sponsor, FirstEnergy Foundation, and of course to PBS Western Reserve, our exclusive media partner. We look forward to seeing you throughout the year and seeing you, of course, next month at the library. Thank you all.
We hope that you enjoyed this Forgotten History Forum and that you learned something new and exciting about Akron and the people who shaped it. If you're interested in watching more from this series or attending a future forum event, please visit akron200.org or pbswesternreserve.org. Thanks for watching and celebrating Akron's bicentennial.